Welcome to Drink Naked. My name is Stewie Robinson from Naked Wines. On this podcast, I'll be talking with a legend, an absolute rock star from the world of wine, and hopefully getting the answers to what drives them to do exactly what they do. Along the way, you'll learn a lot about wine and the many, many exciting things about it, but especially you'll learn about how the winemaker, when free to express their creativity, can make something truly awe-inspiring and life-changing. Today on Drink Naked, we welcome winemaking dynamo Jen Pfeiffer. With over 950 wine show medals to her name, she is one of the most awarded winemakers in Australia. And with wine and winemaking literally flowing through her family bloodlines, it seems like her destiny was a foregone conclusion to be in wine. But was it? So let's try and find out. Jen, you're young, you're much loved internationally, and you've amassed over 50 trophies and 200 gold medals in the wine business, countless silvers, innumerable bronzes. What's your secret?
What's my secret? I think I'm highly competitive as a person, so that absolutely helps because that provides the drive to and the determination to strive for excellence, I suppose. I've always been a high achiever, so I've always set myself goals and targets and tried to follow them through. And I guess for me, one of the ways I like to measure my performance is through wine shows and wine show success, because I think that gives you the opportunity to benchmark against other people. So I've done that and I've achieved that success. And I mean, to sound completely and utterly boring, there's a lot of bloody hard work.
Yeah. Is it that simple? Is it the hard work that you've been putting in for, 20 years?
Yeah, about 20 years. So, yes, I'm feeling quite old.
Not at all. Like I said at the start, you're actually incredibly young when it comes to the age of such an established winemaker in the Australian wine industry. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you actually got to be a winemaker? Because I know that you actually studied science law at university for a time.
Yep.
Where did the flip come?
I guess I'll go back a little bit before that. So I grew up basically with, as you said, with wine flowing through my veins. My dad was a winemaker, and he was a winemaker for Lindemans in the 70s and 80s. And for those who remember those times, you might probably recall Lindemans was quite a premium brand, and as it's got bigger, it's really spread and become more commercial, I suppose. But when he was there, it was quite a premium brand, and he moved all over Australia making wine. Made wine in Coonawarra, made wine in the Hunter, and came to Rutherglen and managed their Corowa site, which is where I was born. He had to close that site down and was moved up to Caradoc, which is near Mildura, and I moved there. And I remember, some of my really young memories are of the smells of the winery, going to visit him. So, the smell of white wine fermenting. And when I first became a winemaker, I remember that smell, and that was like a Marcel Proust moment, remembrance of things past, where it was like, oh, that took me right back to that moment. So I think always I had that exposure to wine. My parents bought what is now Pfeiffer Wines in 1984, and we moved there. So my whole childhood was basically brought up in the winery, playing hide and seek in the winery, discovering which were the right barrels to try and dip your finger in and take some good stuff out of, and being surrounded by people talking about wine, drinking wine all the time. So that was my upbringing, and I guess as some people know about me, I have a little bit of a rebellious streak in me. And when I was about 15 and 16, I was really, I'm not going to do this. I don't want anything to do with the wine industry, and really actually didn't even drink at that point in time. So I was really...
Can I just ask, where did that rebelliousness come from? Why did you actually want to turn your back on the wine business? Was it simply because you were surrounded by it all the time?
I think so. And I think it was just that sort of expectation that that's just what you're going to do. And so I never wanted to do just what people think I'm going to do. I've always wanted to be a little bit different and run my own race.
What if mum and dad had actually said, you will not be a part of the wine industry?
Well, I probably would have been determined to prove them wrong. I've tried to do that a few times in my life, prove people wrong. So, but at this point in time, I as a rebel, I was, into activism and things like that. So when I finished school, I thought, well, I'd got good marks and, I got into science law, and I was thinking, well, I'll do environmental science and environmental law and I'll save the world.
Yeah.
Big fail there.
Well, no, we need you, Jen.
I'm saving the world bottle by bottle, glass by glass. I'm trying.
One sip at a time,
One
right?
sip at a time, exactly. I'm
Brilliant.
trying. So yeah, I guess when I went to uni, I became a little bit disillusioned with, I guess, some, particularly with law, because to me that the principles of it were not that, genuine. I felt like you weren't really making anything. There was, there's nothing to show at the end of it, kind of thing. So, which is what I like about wine. You actually get to create a product, and you get that huge sense of satisfaction at the end. So you're building something, you're creating something. So I got quite disillusioned with that. So just trying to figure out what I was going to do. I thought I'll come home for 6 months and do vintage and make some money, and then I'll just go and travel or whatever. So it took me about 6 years rather than 6 months to actually leave the winery after that time, and then I went and did a vintage in France. So.
And at this stage, were you calling yourself a bona fide winemaker?
Probably by the time I went to France, I was happy to be known as a winemaker. I went there and had a winemaking position. Yeah. But when I first came home, no, I wouldn't have called myself a winemaker. I just called myself Jen Pfeiffer, and happy to be there and learn, and
So did you actually do a viticultural degree course, or have you just learnt from Dad?
Yeah, so I've just learnt on the job. The science that I did at uni, I did a lot of chemistry with that, and the main science involved in winemaking is chemistry. And it's wine chemistry is not that difficult. It's not that complex. I sort of had a really good understanding of all of that. And I probably was pushed a little bit by my dad saying, "Oh, you should study part time," and I just said no. I've had enough of studying after, doing so much. Doing the double degree, I was sick and tired of it. So yeah, I decided not to, and have learnt through experience.
Your very first vintage, if I'm correct here, was in charge of Rutherglen Shiraz.
Yep.
2000?
Yep.
And I believe that won a gold medal. Your very first foray won a gold medal.
Correct.
Is that
yes.
true?
Yes.
Sensational. What pressure did that place on you when you moved forward? Well,
firstly, I think when I won that gold medal, I thought, how good's this? And how easy is this? You just get some grapes, you ferment them, you mature them, and you win gold medals. Easy, right? But then I discovered that it wasn't that easy. I think I probably put more pressure on myself than anyone else to try and maintain that standard. And still today, I put pressure on myself not to maintain a standard, but to improve. And that's the thing. As I said, I have this competitive nature, and I think for me, I've tried to become competitive against myself. Is probably the best way forward, rather than trying to beat other people. I think it's more healthy to try and improve and beat yourself. So that's always been my driver. Try and make better wine than I have before. Improve, on what I did in the past. So yeah, I've always put a lot of pressure on myself, and I think the second gold medal took a little while to come through.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, I think so.
We won't mention that. Because, 900 later.
Yeah, that's right. Who's counting?
You come from Rutherglen. That's your spiritual home, if you like. I mean, that's where your mum and dad's winery is. You're now a senior winemaker at Pfeiffer Wines in Rutherglen. To those people that have never heard about Rutherglen, can you tell us what's special about this place?
Sure, that's a wonderful question, and I'm so pleased you've asked that. So Rutherglen is
totally unprompted, by the way. I must admit.
Oh, awesome. Rutherglen is one of Australia's oldest wine regions. It was founded in the 1850s. It was a gold rush town. So when Rutherglen was founded, there were heaps of people mining for gold. Apparently there were 25 pubs, which is hard to believe because Rutherglen has 2,500 people living in it today. So hard to imagine that we had that many pubs. But so it was settled by French and German settlers, and they brought their love of wine and their interest in wine to the region and planted grapes. And back then, fortified wine making was, the major part of the Australian wine industry. In the 1800s, we didn't have the technology that we do today. And so fortification offered preservation of wine. And the really big wine producing areas were the fortified wine producing areas at this time. And Rutherglen, in fact, was the largest wine producing area in Victoria, and certainly up there as being one of the largest in Australia.
Okay.
So it was a vibrant industry. There's some beautiful old buildings from that time scattered all around that speak of that time and that prosperity, I suppose. And then phylloxera hit in the early 1920s.
What is this thing called phylloxera? For those who haven't heard of it.
Phylloxera is a terrible bug that gets into the vines and kills the vines, and it has decimated vineyards throughout Europe. And some of the original, the original stocks of vines that that basically started the wine industry have been wiped out, and absolutely goes through vineyards and just kills vines. And back then, all the vines were planted on their own roots, and now we plant on phylloxera-resistant rootstock, to deal with the phylloxera, because it's still present. Once you have it in your soils, you don't get rid of it.
Is there any warning sign that it's starting to eat away?
Vines starting to die and lose their vigour. But by then, once you see the signs, it's too late. Yeah. So there's areas in Australia that don't have phylloxera. South Australia doesn't have phylloxera. Most parts of Victoria do. And so there's really strict quarantine laws on how you can move grapes around, and taking cuttings outside regions that have phylloxera is basically illegal.
And cleaning your boots and things like that?
Cleaning your boots, yes. Cleaning tyres in vehicles that go from a vineyard to outside the area. So there's really strict protocols to do that. But back in the 1920s, there was none of this in place. No one really knew that much about it until it hit, and it really hurt the Rutherglen region, because it killed so many vineyards, and Rutherglen, really probably has never recovered back to those glory days that we had in that time. But now what we've got is a region that's so unique. In Rutherglen, we make fortified wines. That's our specialty.
Can you just let us know what actually is the definition of a fortified wine?
Sure. A fortified wine is a wine that has spirit added to it, and the spirit raises the alcohol level in the wine from wherever it started to. In the case of, we've got the Diamond Tawny here, so let's talk about that.
Absolutely.
So something like the Tawny, we would harvest the grapes at around 14 Bowie, which is 14 potential alcohol. We'd ferment about half of that sugar, so we'd have about 6 or 7% alcohol at the time of adding the spirit. And then we fortify, which means to add, in this case, a lower strength spirit to raise the alcohol level up to about 18%, which leaves some of the residual sugar in the wine. So we have a sweet wine with a higher alcohol.
And you love fortifieds, don't you?
I love fortified wines.
So fortified wines go hand in hand with being from Rutherglen, right?
Absolutely.
Muscats.
Topake.
What used to...
Tawny.
Tokays.
Correct, yep.
And Tawnies and ports, yeah?
Yeah, well, we're not allowed to use the term port, Stu, but so it's a little bit like champagne. It's designated for the region in Portugal. So Tawny and vintage styles are definitely what we make, and we make aperas, which are fortified aperitif styles as well. And these definitely my passion, and why I'm so passionate about it. And this is part of the magic of Rutherglen. These wines are absolutely world-class wines. If you were to have a big dinner, and you were going to have the best wines in the world, what would you start with? Champagne. You wouldn't start with sparkling wine.
No.
You'd start with champagne. You'd have, Riesling, German Riesling, Moselle Riesling. You'd have white Burgundy, red Burgundy, Bordeaux, Barolo, and so on and so on. At the end of the night, Rutherglen Muscat would sit comfortably on that table.
Okay.
And international critics would be more than happy to see it there.
Interesting. You mentioned competitiveness and competition before. What is the natural competitor to Rutherglen in other parts of the world for that style?
Well, I think Pedro Ximénez, which is a sweet, luscious, fortified wine from Spain.
Yep.
Because that's really the only wine that gets that richness and that depth that we have with our Rutherglen Muscat. There are some fortified styles that are made in South Africa. They have a Muscat type fortified wine called Jeripigo, which is again sweet and luscious, but in my mind doesn't quite have the depth of flavour that we achieve in Rutherglen. Could be biased, a little bit biased.
And why not? I mean,
exactly.
The actual winery that your dad bought with your mum in 1984?
Yes.
84?
Yep.
Actually goes back to 1860. 1860?
Yeah.
That's old.
It is old in Australian terms, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. Are there any original vines on the property?
No, our oldest vines were planted in 1961 and 1962, and these are Pinot Noir vines, which is absolutely crazy.
And you're still harvesting that Pinot?
Yeah, we do.
Seriously?
We do. So the Pinot. So our property was previously Seppelt's property. They used it as a distillery. They were distilling wine for brandy, basically. And they planted a whole heap of weird and wonderful varieties on what we call our Sunday Creek vineyard.
Yeah.
They planted Pinot Noir, they planted Gamay, they planted Chardonnay, which in the 70s, Chardonnay wasn't, really a common variety. Sort of 70s into 80s, it became more common.
Yeah.
We inherited 26 different Portuguese varieties, which has been fantastic. Another really weird and wonderful variety, Cabernet Sauvignon. Who's heard of that? No one.
No one.
So we basically inherited this fruit salad, but the heritage of these Pinot Noir vines is quite incredible. We believe that they were taken from cuttings from Seppelt's in Great Western.
Yep.
And brought across because at the time in the 60s there was Pinot planted at Great Western, and the decision was that they were going to rip all that up and plant Cabernet and Shiraz.
Yeah.
That's what was on trend at the time. And the vineyard, or the viticulturalist, the Seppelt's group viticulturalist said, I think we should keep these Pinots. So I think a little bit on the sly, transferred them across to Rutherglen, of all places, which seems crazy now. And we have around 10 acres of this really old vine Pinot, which, they sit in the vineyard like this. They're really old and gnarly.
Are they bush vines?
Not quite bush vines. They're very old trellis.
Yeah.
Like a trellis that you wouldn't even see today, not a modern trellis at all. And they don't produce much fruit at all, but it's part of the history and the heritage of our property and part of the history and heritage of our region.
What do you do with it, this Pinot fruit?
Well, we make a table wine.
Yeah.
And we make a sparkling red. And it's a very different style of Pinot. But just if I can go back to those vines, we're doing some work on the lineage of those, and we believe that they are cuttings from some Grand Cru vineyards in Burgundy.
Seriously?
Yeah, and most of these vines, I guess, the history of these vines is with phylloxera. These vines have just died, and it looks like these original cuttings that came out to Australia. There's only 3 sites left in Australia that have these cuttings, and Pfeiffer Wines is one of them. So that's pretty significant.
That's living history. That's a living museum.
Yeah. So my dad's been, because they're not. It's not productive. They're very old vines. They're not highly productive. My dad's been saying, we should pull them out, and my mum and I are like, no, this is the history of the property. We can't do it. And now, I guess with this new information that we've just recently learned, we've got him on board, and we're going to actually take some cuttings, and we're going to probably try and plant another, a couple of acres initially on own roots and see if we can get them to go, because this vineyard's got sandy soil and phylloxera doesn't like sandy soil, and we'll just see if we can get them to go on own roots, and if not, we'll put them on root stock.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And keep the lineage going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. So that, I think, to me, is part of the beauty of Rutherglen. It's the history being brought into the to the modern world. It's the chance to make a wine that is absolutely world class, and not actually many people truly get to do that. And I guess it's the combination of the feeling of a place that has a rich history in wine, and the spirituality that brings, and I guess the sense of obligation that I feel as a custodian to keep, I guess, promoting my region and celebrating the wines of my region.
That's amazing. I want to read you this quote, if I may. Just talking about Rutherglen here for a second and Fortifieds. Where is it? It basically says, from the current James Halliday Wine Companion, which I'm sure you've probably had a look at since it got released, of your rare Rutherglen Muscat NV, sheer quality, hands down, intense, fluid and seductive, and noteworthy for its exquisite balance too. A parade of flavours and textures, a perfect mix of bass and treble notes, and soaring length. Rated 97 points. That puts it in some of the highest echelons of Fortifieds in Australia. Were you proud when you read that?
Oh yes, I was proud. I think thanks very much, James, if you're listening. But yeah, I mean, I was proud to read that, and I guess for me, how I process that is I do a little bit of a fist pump and high fives around the office, and then I think to myself, okay, let's put that away and let's go for 98 points.
Oh, I love it. You're renowned for being extremely generous with your time. Whenever a customer or a customer of Naked Wines, a Naked Angel, comes via your cellar door, you just simply drop everything and come and greet them. I mean, is that a part of your success story too, the fact that the way you actually engage with your customers?
I think so. I think one of the things that I learnt growing up in the winery, I'd get home from school on the bus and whiz down to the cellar door to see my mum to say, home safely and all of that. And hopefully she was serving customers, right? And my mum was always, would tag on the skirt or the shirt or something. And my mum would always be like, no, I'm serving a customer, you can wait. And so we would, my sister and I would be waiting for mum to finish. And so I guess we learnt how she engaged with our customers. And my mum's a real sweetie. She's a really empathetic person, and so she has a really good rapport with customers. So I think I just took all that in as a youngster, and then now as an adult, that's just part of, I guess, part of my personality as well. And I think, ultimately, in the wine business, we are in the hospitality business as well. And I think if people are coming to meet me, that's amazing. And I should feel absolutely privileged that they want to come and meet me.
So how far are you from the nearest capital city, and how long does it take to get to you?
So Melbourne's our closest capital, and that from the city centre is probably 3.5 hours. Okay,
it's a trek.
Yeah, it's a bit of a trek. It's a weekender.
Yeah.
It's a weekender. So, yeah, I mean, people are making an effort to come and see me. So I feel that the least I can do is try and give them my time.
And you're on the banks of the Murray, aren't you?
We are, yep.
Is it flowing?
It is flowing, yes. So and we are dry at the moment. It's dreadfully dry in Rutherglen. We're around about half, or for 2018 we had about half of our average annual rainfall. So it's really, really dry. But we're close to Dartmouth Dam and the Hume Weir. Yep. And so these are the big water reserves that hold a lot of the water that feeds into the Murray. And so during the summer, a lot of water is actually released to go through the system for all the irrigators and just water use, obviously. The river definitely is flowing and always flows very quickly, actually.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Really? Because I know it must be healthy water too, because you've got some platypus living under the bridge, don't you?
Yes, we do. So we have a really picturesque location. It's quintessential Australian.
Yeah.
We have...
paint the picture for us, Jen.
Paint the picture, I will. So we have an Anna branch of the Murray River, which is called Sunday Creek, which separates our Sunday Creek vineyard to the actual winery site. And we have a 42-metre timber bridge, which goes over the creek. Now, this was built by the Frenchman who actually established our property, Monsieur Gassis, and he built this in 1903. Now, before he built the bridge, he had a crazy setup of like some kind of flying fox system for him to get across the creek. And I think he thought, well, I've had enough of this, and he built a bridge. And we still have, some of the original pylons from that go into the water that he built, and the I-beams, the steel beams underneath the bridge are the original ones. We refurbed it in 2003, and we tried to maintain that, like the history, the photographs that we'd seen of it, we sort of copied that design. Anyway, it's a beautiful location. We have the Murray River red gums on the banks, Australian native terrapin or turtles swimming below, maybe a colony of about 80. And at least 2 platypus.
At least 2.
At least 2. We've seen 2 at the same time, so we know we've got at least 2. I've got to say the platypus are shy. So if you're having a glass of wine and a cheese platter on the bridge and you want to see the platypus, you have to tone it down.
Right. Are they really that private?
They're very, very shy.
Right.
So, but they we see them particularly in spring. That's when they're most active, and we see them nearly every day.
Seriously, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Most Australians have never seen a platypus in the wild.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Let me throw this at you from left field. I believe the number of women employed in winemaking in Australia is estimated to be around 38%. However, when it comes to leadership and senior roles, female representation has been estimated at around 10%. Now, clearly, you're part of that 10%. Do you see yourself as a trailblazer in the industry, or do you just go, I'm a winemaker in the industry?
I personally just go, I'm a winemaker in the industry. I know that I actually think probably the generation before me were real trailblazers. And I think of, some of the women who I think have done an amazing job, Louisa Rose, and Sue Hodder, Pam Dunsford. They're probably the generation before me, and for me, they, I guess, were my heroes, and people to look up to and say, oh, well, they've made it, and of course, I guess I can do that. Why can't I do that? In my situation, working in a family business, I've always had full opportunity, and that's one of the great things about being in a family business. You get those opportunities. I think the corporate sector could be, at times, have been more challenging for women. I think today the corporate sector's doing really, really well with providing women with opportunities. I find the figures not surprising, but a little bit disappointing. I'd like to see more women, particularly at the highest level. I do a little bit of teaching for Adelaide Uni, which has a wine science course. And generally it's about 50-50 women and men who are graduating out of the course. So my question is, what's happening to those women?
You mean, are they staying?
Yeah. Like what? Well, clearly they're probably not.
Clearly they're not, based on those stats.
Yeah, based on those stats, they're not. And so why aren't they? And is it because they make a choice actually not to stay in the wine industry, or to have children and therefore change their roles, and that's fine. That's the choice I think every woman makes.
Sure.
But it is sort of surprising when you see the graduate numbers and what happens down the track. So I guess in terms of what my role is in all of this, I as you say, I'm a successful young woman in the wine industry, and I guess all I want to do is, I suppose, continue that and continue to be a voice, and continue to set an example so other people can go, I can be like Jen Pfeiffer. Well, rock it like a redhead.
And rock it like a redhead, because you are. You are a redhead.
I am a redhead.
What's your heritage? What's the background of the family? German, you would think, from Pfeiffer?
Yeah, so my dad's side is German, and my mum has Scottish.
Okay.
Scottish heritage. So she was a Campbell. So there's definitely, there's definitely...
Not related to Campbell's of rather...
No. So funny story about that. When my parents first bought the winery, I don't know why, but they were thinking, we won't call it Pfeiffer Wines because no one will know how to pronounce Pfeiffer, no one will know how to spell Pfeiffer, all of those things. Michelle Pfeiffer wasn't really famous at that point in time. And they were talking to the Campbells, and they were like, we don't know what to call the winery. And the Campbell said, well, what's your maiden name? To my mum. And my mum said, it's Campbell. And they said, no, we don't think you should. Pfeiffer's much better. Yeah. So they squashed that one.
Oh, wow. I actually looked up the etymology, or whatever the term is, for Pfeiffer, and it says in German a piper, as in Pied Piper or whistler.
That's right, the Pied Piper of Hamlet.
Is that where it
He
comes
was
from?
a German.
Was he?
Don't cross us.
So you've got musicality. Oh, look at this for a segue. You've got musicality in your bones, right? Now, we actually share a love, which is the love of David Bowie and his music. Where did that come from?
Oh, I think when I was in high school, I was lucky that one of my friends, she was the youngest in her family, and she had lots of older brothers and sisters. And so as a result of that, and we like music, and our friendship was based around listening to music and talking and all of those things. And so she exposed me to a lot of music that her brothers and sisters were listening to.
Yep.
And I distinctly remember I was probably in about year 8, and, I'm sure I'd heard some Bowie on the radio or whatever, but I wasn't really into him. And then we were at her house. I think we were like lying down looking at the stars or something like that, and we had listened to Space Oddity. And, it's a little bit psychedelic and, it was just sort of a little bit trippy. And, of course, I thought, wow, what is this? And then I wanted to discover more and more about Bowie, and also went down the path of, Led Zeppelin, Hendrix, all of those great, classics, I suppose. But really, Bowie has stuck with me more than any of those other ones. What I love about David Bowie is how much he changed, and how he wasn't afraid, number one, to be different. He wasn't trying to be different. He just was different. And he, I think, embraced his uniqueness, and he didn't shy away from that. And he changed. He wasn't scared to start, to change and to move from one sort of genre to the other. And I think that's for me, it provides a great soundtrack to your life, because as you change as a person and you follow his music, there's always something to go with you along the journey.
Have no fear.
Have no fear. Just do it.
The reason I mentioned that was because, one, we have a shared love of David Bowie and his music, but also because the range of wines that you make for Naked Wines is named as a homage, really, to David Bowie's music, is it not? Yeah.
So I've got the different tiers of my wines for Naked, the Rebel, the Hero, and the Diamond. And anyone who is listening and loves David Bowie will know that we've got Rebel, Heroes, and Diamond Dogs represented there. So I guess, to be totally honest, how those names came to be, I was trying to actually get the label together pretty quickly. And initially I wanted to call my brand The Redhead by Jen Pfeiffer. But I was advised that actually focusing on my name as the brand, Jen Pfeiffer, would be better. And I came up with this crazy tagline, "Rock it like a redhead," which seems to have stuck pretty well.
It stuck really well.
It stuck really, really well. So that was the first bit. And then I was thinking, well, I've got these 3 tiers. How am I going to differentiate them? And one of my friends said, why don't you just name them after Bowie tracks? You love Bowie so much. And I was thinking, well, okay. But I want it to sort of be something that relates to me and to the different tiers. And so Rebel, I love Rebel as a song, but that was a good one because, I like to think of myself as having that little bit of a rebellious streak. And I think, the Hero, well, I'd love to be a hero, so why not? And then the Diamond at that top tier being, the pick of the bunch. So it sort of worked. It did work, and that's where it's come from. So a lot of people have given me suggestions as well. I should make a Black Star wine. That would have to be very dense and very intense, wouldn't it? So
and very contemplative. So you just stare at it before you drink it.
Exactly.
For hours.
Exactly. You need to decant it for 10 hours and just look at it. So maybe towards the end of my career.
I mean, just on a side moment, we're actually talking here in the month of January. David Bowie was born in the month of January and very sadly died in the month of January just 3 years ago.
Yep.
Did that shake you up?
Yeah, it really did. I was surprised how emotional I got because I think, he's totally one of my heroes and provides a lot of inspiration to my life personally and also to my career and to think, don't stand still too long, don't be afraid to try new things.
Yeah.
And so I was incredibly emotional, and I'm such a passionate person.
Yeah.
So, for me, Bowie is such a part of my life, and sort of feeling like, you've lost that. It was incredibly sad.
Yeah, it was incredibly sad, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But it's all about grabbing the opportunity and just running with it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Being who you are.
That's right. And not looking back, I think, is really important.
Absolutely. Just a little segue as well. You were actually quite humble when you said that you mentioned 3 other women that were heroes of yours and leaders of the industry, but you're actually doing a lot to actually lead the industry already. And I won't mention your age, but you've only been around the industry for 20 years as a winemaker and achieved so much in that 20 years. But you're also part of the Rutherglen Young Bloods organisation. What is that?
So it's a group of the newer generation of winemakers coming through who are working together to take our wines, or the region's wines, to, I guess, the nation and hopefully the world. I guess one of the issues you have when you are a region with such history is that sometimes people just think all you've got is the history, and they don't understand that there's a future. So part of the focus of the group is to show people the new things that we're doing, and the new wines that we're making, and the new styles, and that Rutherglen is actually contemporary. So we do events in Rutherglen, but also outside of Rutherglen, basically trying to promote the region. So we've got a lot of bloody legends in Rutherglen, but we've also got some pretty good young bloods.
We've talked about fortifieds. In terms of table wines,
Yep.
still wines, what's your favourite?
Favourite
To make.
Ooh, well, favourite to drink, which is
Okay.
important because
It is.
It is important because I think that also is what you like making. So white Riesling and red Shiraz.
Yeah.
Bit boring, but I like Riesling. Why I like Riesling? It's all about the purity of the fruit. So the great Riesling doesn't have a lot of intervention in the winery. It's about the vineyard and picking the fruit at the absolute best time. And then as a winemaker, having enough input to take it in the right path, but not having too much input so that you don't sort of over-complicate it. And then those wines, I think what I love about Riesling is the good ones, how much they change over time.
Over how much time?
20 years,
Yeah,
30 years.
okay.
I think a lot of people don't think white wines actually have that sort of aging potential. But particularly Riesling, and Semillon's another great variety for aging as well, has that so much natural acidity, and that acid just keeps the fruit fresh and keeps the wine fresh for such a long time. And, I've had some amazing Rieslings that are 30, 40, even 50 years old.
Shiraz.
Yes.
Shiraz, Shiraz or Syrah?
Well, I don't know. Whatever takes your fancy. I really don't. I don't mind. But I'm a Shiraz girl.
When did people start calling it Shiraz?
I don't know.
It just came out of the blue, didn't it, really?
It just came out of the blue. So there's a very old gentleman in Rutherglen who calls it Shiraz.
Shiraz?
Shiraz, yeah. So
that's individual, isn't it?
it is individual. That's a nice way of putting it. So yeah. So Shiraz. I love Shiraz. I mean, it's so Australian.
Grows well in Rutherglen.
Grows well in Rutherglen.
Why? Why Rutherglen? We haven't talked about the climate of Rutherglen.
Yes, so Rutherglen is a dry, warm climate, fairly continental. So we have warm summers and quite cold winters. We have probably an average of around 32, 33 as a maximum temperature in summer, and minimum temperature in winter would be probably 0, -1.
Jeepers.
So it's quite a range.
Yeah.
It is a dry climate, and it's not humid, so that's really good for the production of fruit because we don't have many disease issues. But it's really good country for red and fortified because of those warmer, dry conditions. Now, Shiraz is a variety that grows all throughout Australia.
Yep.
And I like Shiraz for this reason, because it's quite individual depending on where it's grown.
Yeah.
And so there's so many different styles of Shiraz that are being made now. You do have those whole bunchy Syrah styles that are coming out of the cooler areas, and then you have the more traditional full-bodied, big buxom reds that are coming from, the really traditional areas like Barossa and McLaren Vale and things like that. And for me, what Rutherglen Shiraz has weight and depth, but we have a slightly earthy character to our Shiraz as well, which lends itself to a savouriness. And what I love about Shiraz is having rich, ripe fruit and tannin, but the tannin to be savoury, because I think when your wine finishes savoury, that's when you want another glass.
Yeah, excellent.
So that's what I'm trying to do. And I guess I see similar characters with that sort of depth of flavour and savouriness coming out of the Great Western Grampians area, and that would have to be outside of Rutherglen, of course. Of course. My favourite area in Australia for Shiraz. So yeah, I drink a lot of those wines, and so in terms of the structure, that's what I'm trying to achieve.
You know that mantra that you often hear, which is, great wines are born in the vineyard. Do you adhere to that?
It certainly makes life a lot easier. Absolutely makes wine a lot easier. I think it's a combination. I think when my dad started in the industry, so that was the 70s, he started in the vineyard. He had an ag science degree and he started in the vineyard. And back then the culture was, if you're any good, you get moved into the winery because you make good wine in the winery. And the vineyard wasn't actually given that much attention. But I think as our wine industry's matured, actually what we're seeing is more and more attention being given to the vineyard and the role that great fruit has in making great wine. You can give or two different winemakers the same fruit and you'll get two very, very different wines. And
that's magical in itself, isn't it?
That is magical in itself, and that's part of it,
Yeah.
So I think good winemakers can make good wines from average fruit.
Yep.
Good winemakers can make great wines from good fruit.
Yes.
And good winemakers can make incredible wines from amazing fruit.
Can you make a good wine from bad fruit?
Yeah, you can. It's just hard. It's really hard, and you've got to, you've got to throw a few different things at it, and yeah, it's difficult. And when we talk about bad fruit, we're talking about fruit where in the seasons where we've had a lot of rain. We're not achieving the ripeness level that we want. There's some disease issues there. So how do you best mitigate that? And as you said, I've been in the wine industry for 20 years. In Australia, in that 20 years, it's been at least 10 years of drought. So I haven't seen a lot of disease in my career, but 2011 was when the drought broke, and boy did it break. Yeah. And that was a really, really difficult year, and I have never spent so much time in the vineyard as I did that year, and I don't regret a thing. We dropped a lot of fruit that wasn't up to scratch, so we made a lot less wine, but what we made was of very good quality. And incredibly, I won a few more of those gold medals from the 2011 vintage. So I think it can be done, but it's just harder, and you've got to have that dedication and that hard work. And one of the things I guess I've been thinking about recently with my career, and I guess how I can guide other people as well, is when something's hard, you actually work out how much you really want it. Because if it's difficult and you give up, you don't want it that much. But if it's hard and you choose to keep pushing forward and keep trying to achieve what you've set out to achieve, then you know that you actually really want to do it.
Which brings me again to a question which we might have actually asked before, but the answer might have actually changed. What is the most rewarding part about making a great wine? To you, the most rewarding thing? Is it the fact that people enjoy it, or the fact that you actually created something marvellous? Because it is magical, the winemaking process, isn't it?
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad that you think it's magical. We are magicians, we winemakers. Absolute magicians.
Absolutely you are.
I think it's a number of things that I get out of it now. I think when I was in my career early, if I thought I'd made a great wine, that'd be enough for me, and I'd be really chuffed about that, and I've made this, and isn't it good, and I'd be really proud. But I think as I've matured, it's the enjoyment that other people get out of it. But also one of the things I think I really enjoy now is actually sharing my knowledge with other younger winemakers coming through the industry, and we get a whole lot of young winemakers domestically and internationals who come and work vintages, and being able to give them an experience which you can see impacts them professionally and also personally, that helps them on their path. That's really rewarding as well. and making good wine as part of all of that.
Have you ever completely cocked it up with a wine?
I haven't completely. I wouldn't say with a wine. I've done a few really, really stupid things. I remember, I think it was my second vintage, and we bought this new press and really didn't know what to do. And we had muscat inside the press, and it was fermenting, and it wasn't pressing well. And the press is closed up, right? And the screen's blocked, and the wine's fermenting. And so the juice can't get out because the screens are blocked. And the fermentation is causing this pressure to build up and up and up in the press. And I'm thinking, how do I release the pressure? I've got no idea how to release the pressure. So I thought, all I can think of to do is open the door. So you put the press in the upright position, and then you open the door, and there's about 200 kPa of pressure in the press at this time, which is a lot. And so I open the door, and this fermenting muscat, which looks like, there's no other way to describe it, looks like poo, just came out whoosh, everywhere, and probably for maybe about 20 metres, just fired in every single direction. And I was like, close the door, close the door, close the door, trying to close the door as quickly as I could. And oh my God. So that took about 5 hours to clean up. And
did you save any of that?
I didn't put it back in. Trust me, folks, I didn't put that back in. And I drove a fairly large forklift into the receival bin when I was about 23. So that was a bit of a cock up as well. But yeah, I mean, these things happen. Things happen. That's the beauty of it all. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, when you finally got the receival bin to work again, you're thinking, God, I'm an idiot. Why did I drive the forklift in there? But anyway.
On the flip side of that, have you ever made a wine that you've gone, oh, this will be, okay, and it's turned out to be wow?
Yeah, definitely.
Where did that come from?
Yes, definitely. Sometimes, you think that you've made a wine, and exactly that, you think it's okay. And then all of a sudden people are like, this is amazing. You think, I'll just enter it in a wine show. Oh, wow, you win a trophy. Yeah. It's like, oh, okay, that was good. So first time that happened to me was 2003. I made a Marsanne, which is a variety that is planted widely in northeast Victoria and central Victoria, likes warmer climates. It's white wine. And I'd made this wine, and I just bottled it, and I thought, that's the best. I did the best I could, and I was happy with what I did, but I didn't think it was a world beater or anything like that. And anyway, I remember I was entering a wine show, and I worked out, you send 4 bottles of each wine, and I'd worked out there was 4 spaces left in the box, and I thought, I'll enter one more wine, why not? So I thought, I'll put that 03 Marsanne in. Anyway, that wine ended up winning the trophy for the best white wine of show and the best wine of show.
Amazing.
And I thought to myself, that was the first time I'd won best wine of show. So I was like, that was a big, big high. And then I decided, I went for a competition, for a Young Winemaker of the Year competition. I thought I'll put that in as one of my wines, and ended up, winning that award as well. So yeah, I mean, I thought that was just a wine, and I got that wildly wrong, didn't I?
Your impression versus other people's impression.
Exactly.
Oh, just brilliant.
So you shouldn't. I mean, I think that's, if you think that everything you do is brilliant, you're setting yourself up for a fall. So I think it's probably good not to think everything's good. And often, sometimes I think, this wine's fantastic. I really love it, and then it's not as popular as what I thought it would be with the consumers, because maybe it's got too much tannin or too much acid, and I like that as a wine professional, but the consumer wants something a little bit softer and more easy drinking. So yeah, you can get it wrong.
Your time with Naked Wines, since 2012,
Yep.
you were one of the very first winemakers to actually join Naked Wines Australia.
Yep.
And you've got, I think, the most amount of Naked Angel customer followers. Like I said at the start, you're very loved. You have a portfolio of wines across the 3 David Bowie range that satisfies most people. Is there anything that you still want to do?
Yes, there is definitely some things I want to do. So I actually want to put it to the Angels.
As we do with everything.
As we do with everything. I want to see if the Angels would support me to make Prosecco.
Okay.
Sparkling red.
Yep.
So actually was even thinking giving them the choice.
Yeah. Where would you get the Prosecco grapes from?
King Valley.
Yeah.
So King Valley's quite close to Rutherglen.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of associations with growers there, so that one would be, I think, achievable pretty easily.
Yeah.
And then Sparkling Red. So one of my most popular wines on Naked has been the Rebel Bubbles.
Yes.
So whether I do the Rebel Redhead Bubbles as a Sparkling Red, and maybe even whip out some of that Pinot Noir to bash into it for something different.
That would be very different. And yet Sparkling Red is not strange to Australia, is it?
No, it's probably one of the most uniquely Australian wines. I think if we think about what are the really uniquely Australian wines that you can't get from other wine producing countries or that originated in Australia, it's Sparkling Shiraz,
yeah,
Hunter Semillon,
yeah,
and Rutherglen Muscat.
Absolutely, those three, isn't it?
Those three, that's it.
Why Sparkling Shiraz?
Why Sparkling Shiraz?
Why is it unique to Australia? I've always wondered that.
Well, we were the country to invent it, I suppose.
Yeah.
Great Australian invention. I'm sure there were some winemakers just sitting around, maybe having a beer and saying, "We've got some Shiraz. I like fizz. Let's just put some gas in that and see what happens." I'm just joking. I don't really know the origins of it, but that was one of, I guess, Australia's inventions to. We had Shiraz that grew so well in our country, so, let's put a different spin on it. And you go to places like the UK and people, I love Australian sparkling Shiraz. It's something they really associate with us.
I think I told you this story a couple of weeks ago when, because you live and breathe wine and I live and breathe wine for the last 30 years too. And I was driving with a well-known winemaker on a 2-day meet and greet of vignerons and grape growers down through Langhorne Creek a couple of years ago. And all we did was drink wine, taste wine, appraise wine, meet growers. And on the way back, my friend said, "Oh, we're just going to pop in here." And I went, "What?" And he said, "Stu, it's not all about wine." And so he ducked into a marine automotive agency and he basically lowered a V8 into his vintage speedboat.
Oh,
and
wow.
I went, "That's great. Is that what you do in your spare time?" He said, "Absolutely. I love hooning around in my vintage speedboat." What do you do when you're not making wine?
Oh, when I'm not making wine, that's a good question because, as you say, I live and breathe wine. So a lot of my time is in that. I really like cooking. Which I suppose is pretty whiny anyway, but I really do like cooking. I like growing my own food. So at home we have like an orchard, and we have pears, apples, citrus, nectarines, peaches, olives, really good veggie garden. So I like that side of things.
So I can just picture it. You just literally at dinner time
just walk out.
I'll have some of that.
Yeah.
Some of those beans.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So
can you taste the difference?
Of course you can taste the difference. Absolutely. I think everyone knows you can taste the difference. So I really enjoy that, and that's just something that's very relaxing. I don't play a lot of sport anymore, but I used to love playing sport. So I have an interest in watching sport, which is what tends to happen when you get older, isn't it? You do a lot less playing and a lot more watching. But I'm an avid cricket watcher.
Well, can I just interrupt there because I actually believe that you may have been an avid cricket player at the elite level with the Victorian women's side. Is that true?
Yeah. So when I was 17, I made it into the Vic side, and where was the women's cricket back then? There was no future in it back then. So I didn't really pursue it, but I loved playing. I loved playing sport when I was a kid, and anything with a ball. Basically, I loved it. So I spent a lot of time just throwing a ball against a wall and catching it. And so cricket was pretty easy for me because I had very good hand-eye coordination. And I really wanted to be a wicket keeper, actually. At club level I kept, but I could also bowl, and I was a spinner. And that was actually something that not many people had skill in. And so when I played for Victoria, they had me as a spinner and not a keeper. But I loved keeping because, as you know, I'm pretty chatty, and I loved being there behind the stumps and
chatty. Is that what they call sledging these days?
It's like banter.
Banter.
I loved the banter behind the stumps. I absolutely loved the banter, and I played Yeah, when I was a bit younger, I played in Rutherglen against the boys, so I was pretty much the only girl playing against the boys. I used to open the batting and be behind the stumps and then take the pads off and bowl. And our next door neighbour, he was in the other team, and I sledged him. I bantered him so hard one day that he actually walked off.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that I should be proud of it, but I thought it was pretty witty. But he obviously didn't see the joke. So but I loved keeping because that's where the action was. But I was actually a very skillful spin bowler, not Shane Warne level. I was an offie anyway, not a leggy.
Were you?
Yeah. So
do you reckon the love of keeping comes from the fact that is basically you were actually calling the shots?
Yeah. I and you're in the game the whole time.
In the game, completely in the game all the time.
Yeah, and you can really read. You read the play very easily, and you can see, see what's happening. So I did like that. But when I played for Victoria, I was an offie. So
interesting. And so, having complete control, do you actually, going back to the vineyard for a second, do you trust your viticulturist, or do you actually make the call on when to harvest?
Oh, that's definitely my call.
That's your call?
That's my call, yeah. So I think nearly every winemaker would choose the harvest date, not the viticulturalist, because viticulturalists, I guess are nervous because harvest for them is basically the end of their cycle.
Yeah.
So almost the start of their cycle is pruning, because that's when you set up the vine for what's going to happen next. And then once they go through the growing season, ripening to harvest, that's the end. So a viticulturalist has done all that hard work, and they don't want us as winemakers to leave it out there too long and then for it to rain and it's going to stuff up, So viticulturalists are very keen always to harvest, and winemakers are always pushing for more and more flavour. We'll leave it
one more day.
One more day, exactly. Or another 3 days. We'll just get a little more flavour, a little bit more flavour. So that's always, they say production and marketing clash, but sometimes production and production can clash too.
I can totally imagine that happening. So do you ever have rain events coming at the wrong time in Rutherglen?
Yes, definitely. What I've seen in 20 years, when I started my career, most of our rain came from Western Australia, and it was very predictable. If it was raining in Perth, we'd sort of say in 3 or 4 days it's going to hit us, and that nearly always happened. Now a lot of those Perth rain events actually go down into the Great Australian Bight and miss us, and we get a lot more rain from the north of Australia. So it's a lot more tropical, therefore a lot more unpredictable, and you can be under it, and you can completely miss it. So I've definitely seen those rainfall patterns changed. We now get a lot more late spring into summer rain, whereas the Western Australian rain used to be sort of late winter into spring. So that can definitely have an impact on harvest. And I've definitely made the decision to pick because rain's coming, and I've never regretted that.
Has it always been? Have you sometimes picked just shy of the optimum ripeness?
Yeah. But again, it's that wine's
balance.
It's a balance, and wine's a compromise. Anyone who says, I make my wine without compromise, tell me how. Because I just don't think you can do it. I think wine is always a compromise. No cellar's perfect. No vineyard is perfect. But what we're trying to do is make everything the best it can be with what we've got. And so, if the decision is pick it before the rain, or we have this 50 mils of rain and then I have to wait 5 days and pick it after the rain, at which time the fruit will deteriorate, always pick it before.
You just touched on the point then. If you do have a rain event and there's lots of water, why do you have to wait 5 days? So
you can, it depends how much water you have. Okay, so if you only have 5 mils, you probably can wait 24 hours, 48 hours. It's just enough for the vine's going to take that water up, and some of that water is going to dilute the flavour and the sugar in the fruit, and so you've got to give the vine time to process that water through. So the more rain you have, the longer you need to wait.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense, yes. I just want to basically go and wrap this up because I know that you've got a ferry to catch. But I just want to ask you a couple of questions just to fire off at you. Basically 5 questions in 5 seconds.
Okay.
If you like. What's your favourite wine?
Vintage port.
What has been your favourite wine moment?
Making wine in the Douro Valley.
Why?
Oh, it's an amazing place. I talk about Rutherglen being my spiritual home. If I ever run away from Rutherglen as my spiritual home, I'm going to the Douro. You'll find me there.
Yeah, really.
It's an amazing place. To me, it's magical. I love it. I love the Douro Valley.
Your favourite David Bowie song?
Station to Station.
Why?
It's 10 minutes of Bowie in one song. I'm greedy. I love that era. I absolutely love that era. And I think, that was when Bowie was going through a really tumultuous time in his life, but the music was incredible. And, from that Earl Slick guitar chord that just goes and goes and goes to the intro, into all that spooky music, Carlos Alomar doing his funk, stuff. It's just an incredible song, and I've never got tired of it. Sometimes you go in and out of songs, you really like something for a while. I have loved Station to Station from the moment I've heard it till this very day.
Do you reckon we should be actually playing David Bowie when we drink Jen Pfeiffer wines?
Oh, I think that would be perfect.
Do you have it blaring through the winery when you're actually making it? That'd be cool.
I have a fair bit of Bowie going on, but not always. Like sometimes I don't want any music in the background, because I'm when I've got a lot of pumps going, I need to hear everything. But yeah, when the time calls for it, absolutely have Bowie playing full pitch. So,
can you just tell us? I know you make wine that is sold all around the world, but can you just in a nutshell say what you enjoy about making wine for Naked Wines Australia?
I love the community. That's the thing about Naked that's really got me hooked, I suppose. I've made some amazing friends, angels and winemakers through Naked. I love the fact that it's bringing people together who all believe in this, common good, which is supporting the independent winemakers like me, cutting out the middleman, and I guess delivering something that we all can be a part of, and that connection that the angels get to have with the winemakers. I think that's incredible. I think it's completely unique, and that's what I love about Naked.
And what do you want to be doing in 5 years' time?
I want to be continuing my career as a... Not
a leading question at all, was it? No.
I want to be continuing my career with Naked and also making wines for Pfeiffer Wines. Mm-hmm. I have I'm not sure if I can get this done in 5 years, but I do have this dream that I want to set up a Fortified Symposium, which is an international event.
Yeah.
And I want to bring together fortified producers from all over the world. Maybe I'm going to host it, organise to see if I can host it in Portugal.
Oh, Jen, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, and I'd like to pull together, Portuguese producers, Spanish producers, Australian, South African, Italian, bring all these people together and have this symposium where we celebrate fortified wines and we talk about fortified wines, and we do some amazing tastings with some of the oldest and rarest wines in the world. And
How old would they be?
Well, Madeira, which is a very old style of fortified wines, there are wines that date back to the 1600s.
Have you tried any of those?
I have.
Are they still drinking? They're
still drinking. I mean, they're wines that when you drink them, you're sort of just like, I'm just in this moment of drinking something that's, older than I could ever possibly imagine. So I think the oldest one I've tried was a 1780.
See, that's absolutely amazing. I've read stories about when James Halliday has gone over to a club in London when he was a young man and opened a bottle that was similar age and basically started tears welling up in his eyes simply because of the tasting of that moment in history.
Yeah, that's right. That's what it is. It's a moment in time, and I sort of was just
yeah.
So just pinching myself flat out. So I think I would really love to be able to bring the fortified industry together to do that and invite, some of the leading journalists from around the world and really celebrate this style of wine. That's a career goal for me. I hope it'd be amazing if I can achieve it in 5, but if I can't, maybe 10.
Let's do it. Jen, I want to thank you so much for coming in to drink Naked with me. You rock it like a redhead, and let's taste your tawny.
Thanks for having me, Stu.
Pleasure.
Rock it like a redhead.
Rock it like a redhead. Thanks for listening to Drink Naked. Hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. If you like what you heard, leave a 5-star review. And if you think you know someone that might like it as much as you, please let them know that we exist. In the meantime, stay tuned for the next winemaker rockstar to come visiting at Naked HQ.